What the museum asks the artist is to pick out some object in the museum's collection that inspires them and talk about the object not from a sort of a art historical point of view, but from a sort of personal point of view of why does this make your heart soar like an eagle. The basic core mission of museums is to have treasures and store them and maintain them. As I've heard a number of museum photography curators complain, I got this beautiful picture and I want to show it, but they won't let me put it out in the light. You know, it's like, are we trying to make exhibitions? Or are we trying to store treasures? Well, that's the answer. One of the things that I always notice and love when I go around to various museums, and I'll show you some examples of this later, but is to not only look at the objects in the museums, but their shadows. This shadow is actually, to me, even more beautiful than the object. And of course, the object itself is worth money, is a treasure, it can be stored. The shadow is this experiential, lovely thing. You know, I don't mean to say that you could have the shadow without the object. But I think there's a way to, as somebody who consumes art, as well as making art, the main place that the Mona Lisa exists is not behind 3-inch plexiglass in Paris at the Louvre. The main place that it exists is here and here and here and here and here and here and here. It's mostly in our heads, and I think one of the things that people don't tend to think about art is that it's like, you know, when you used to have those decal transfers or temporary tattoos or something, you know. It's not the object, it's that you put it on yourself and then it's on you, you know. Or you go to Yosemite and put the little Yosemite sticker in your car window, you know. And I think when you go to a museum or a gallery, unless you were having a really bad day, you come away with something stuck to you that didn't used to be there. And I know for me, when I'm walking back to my car from a museum or a gallery, I always see much more than when I was walking in. Even though I'm walking by exactly the same thing, suddenly I see them all. This is not technically following their instructions. I'm not talking about an object in their collection. I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do. But I am following the directions in the sense I'm talking about something that's inspiring me that I see here at the museum. A shadow is something to think about. We have a word for it. We use it metaphorically all the time. You talk about a shadow as being sort of a sense of menace. You talk about a shadow as being somebody sort of following you along. I mean, we use it sort of metaphorically in a lot of different ways. But I mean, I think there's a recognition on some level that even though this isn't an actual thing, and it isn't something that you pay attention to, it is somehow worth thinking about. And one of the things that as a photographer you learn right away is that if you're trying to take a picture of somebody and they're standing half in shadow and half in the sun, you don't have a picture. You know, the photography itself will teach you what you need to pay attention to. And one of the main lessons that photography teaches you is that you don't actually photograph objects. Objects do not enter your camera. What enters your camera is the light that is bouncing off the objects. That photography is entirely light. And our experience, even beside photography, our experience of the world has to do with taking in sensory information from our senses and the brain sort of putting it together and saying, well, based on what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, what I'm smelling, I think there's somebody standing over here. But I don't actually have direct experience of that. It's just sort of I'm sort of putting together a picture using my senses. Since you guys came in, you've made this shadow even better over here. Yeah. That's cool. And if you come away from this talk and sort of say, actually, look at this thing I see over here, you know, next week sometime, I will feel like I've done my job. This is over just in that gallery right over there. This is at the Corcoran Gallery in Washington, D.C. This is the National Gallery. Some of you may know what artist was having a work exhibited in this room. This is the Metropolitan Museum. The Louvre. The shadow is kind of doing a different gesture than the arm is. This is in Buenos Aires, and it was the shadow and the peeling paint and the statue all kind of were equally beautiful, and as a trio were even better. And of course, the peeling paint is a prime example of something that you are not supposed to notice. Then this is upstairs. This is in the photo department. It's by Ruth Bernhard. The picture is called Doorknob, but that's actually lying because it's not actually a picture of a doorknob. This is a picture of light. This is a picture of light cavorting around a doorknob with great enthusiasm and a wild abandon. Unlike a shadow, which we have a word for, or a rainbow, which is a beautiful light phenomenon that we have a word for. You can be talking to somebody on your cell phone and say, oh, I'm looking at a beautiful rainbow. They know exactly what you're talking about. They know it's beautiful. They know it's valuable, even though it's actually nothing. But understandably, nothing is beautiful in this way. But if you were talking to somebody on your cell phone and the doorknob was doing this, you would not have a one-word way to say what was going on. I mean, there are reflections, there are refractions, there's some words that apply, but this is something that we don't have any word for, that we don't pay any attention. But for me, this is, I mean, Julie and I were talking about this picture just a couple hours earlier up in the gallery, and this could be, for a spiritual person, I think this would be a very spiritual picture. For an aesthetic person like me, this is a very aesthetic picture. But it's really talking about how the things that you shouldn't be paying attention to are so much more beautiful than the things that you should. What photography does is you take some ordinary rectangles worth of reality and say, well, wait a minute, this isn't ordinary. Look how beautiful it is. You're basically recontextualizing the ordinary world. And I think there's a very interesting interaction, which I never actually have been able to sniff out the art history behind this, but I stopped teaching history of photography after 14 years, so I fired myself before I figured this out exactly. But I don't know if you guys know about Marcel Duchamp and his ready-mades, and he displayed a urinal and a bottle rack and these very sort of just objects from the normal world, and said, this is a sculpture. And he was showing at Stieglitz's gallery in New York. And up until that time, the photographers around Stieglitz were like, well, we're going to make paintings that we're going to make pictures that look like paintings, and they're all sort of fuzzy and poetic looking and all this stuff. And here in comes this guy, and he's showing urinals and bottle racks and everything. And at that point, suddenly photography takes a turn and sort of says, well, ordinary objects are kind of cool. And Julia was talking about this picture by Edward Weston of the bottom of a toilet. There's the view of a toilet if you were about here, which you generally aren't, but turns out it looks very good from down there. You know? And so to me, I think there's, and I suspect there's a very good connection, because this is how art ideas travel, is the artists sort of infect each other with these sort of strange ideas, which are then reinterpreted to mean something different. I think in Duchamp's case, it was sort of like, he wasn't saying this is beautiful and you should love it. He was saying, I'm an artist and I say this is art, and you got to figure out how you think about that. And the photographers, being this sort of naive, hippie-ish bunch since the earliest days of photography, sort of went, wow, that is really nice. Oh, that's cool. I can do that too. Hey, look at this toilet. Hey, look at this pepper. You know, hey, look at this. You know, that in fact the things that are going to give you joy in your life are things that are insubstantial. They're things that are possibly, in the case of light and shadow, arguably non-existent, and yet are things that can give you joy and pleasure and aesthetic delight. I think there's an amazing ability to sort of say, well, what is this about? Including to say it could be about looking at ordinary, boring things and seeing that they're not boring and that they're beautiful.